60 Minutes Rewind.
It may seem like playing with words when we say what we've got on our hands is not an energy crisis. But it's not an energy crisis. It's a time crisis and a money crisis. Neither time enough nor money enough to lick our energy problems before they could lick us. As far as energy is concerned, there's more than enough of that. The problem is how to convert it to work for us fast enough and cheap enough to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. Take the sun up there. It's got more energy than we could use up in 1 billion years. If the sun ever goes out, an energy shortage will be the least of our problems. But the government and the big energy companies say that using the sun as a major source of power is off in the future. How far off in the future? That's what we wanted to know. This thing is an innovative device called a solar collector. The idea is to catch sunshine for purposes other than tan or sweat. A lot of people think that for a country in an energy crisis, this is the wave of the future, if it can possibly be made to work. Well, this one, on a handsome house in Coral Gables, Florida, was installed in 1938, 41 years ago, and it's been working fine ever since, saving the owners maybe $11,000 in electric bills. Collectors are all over the roofs down here, working proof that solar heaters can be a good investment. Now, 41 years after they had this thought in Coral Gables, solar energy may be an idea whose time has come for all of us. Changing the way we heat our homes from conventional fuels to the sun will be a gradual process. But 1/4 of all the energy consumed in this country heats our hot water and our living and working space. Every year we build about 2 million new housing units, most of them repeating the energy-wasting mistakes of the past. If building industry estimates are correct, half of all the houses that will be standing in the year 2000 have not yet been built. So unless we build them better and make use of the sun, they will be perpetual drains on the energy reserves of the country and the pocketbooks of their owners. There's nothing complicated about a basic solar panel, just a lot of copper tubing in a box to absorb the sun's heat. The cover is plastic or glass, so the incoming heat can't escape. Put a panel on the roof, send water through it, and the sun will heat that water many days of the year to 120, 130, even 180 degrees. In this typical system, a storage tank holds the water hot in the basement. A conventional heater may add heat if necessary, but the sun has done most of the work. Now, if you want to heat the house with solar energy, imagine a big bin filled with stones surrounding the hot water storage tank. The heat from the tank warms the stones. A fan blows air through the stones, warming the air, which warms the house. The stones hold the heat of sunny days for use on the cloudy and cold days. If necessary, a small auxiliary heater adds a few degrees to the air. But again, the sun has done most of the work, cutting the cost for conventional fuel. There are endless variations, but that's one basic approach. Harry Thomason builds and sells systems that work that way. If you are up on the roof at mid-morning near Washington, D.C., and the collectors are hot, you can see what happens when the water system is turned on. Voila, steam under the glass. The water just trickles down the grooves in the black collectors, efficient and cheap. You may wonder what flash of scientific genius led Thomason to his invention.
Way back in 1956, down in North Carolina at my wife's home, it was a hot summer day and sun was shining on the barn roof. Cloud up in a hurry, down came the rain. The rain hit that darkened barn roof, came off as solar heated water. When I dashed under the barn, down came a few drops of solar heated water. You can see, well, that's a solar heat collector. Let's refine it, and I patented it.
And that's what started it?
Yes, sir.
If you were putting this system into a new house, what would putting this system in add to the cost of the house?
Nothing. Virtually nothing. You can build a home today with solar heat in it at approximately the same cost as a conventional system.
North of Albany, New York, the town hall at Half Moon cost no more than a conventional building and looks like hundreds of other government buildings put up in the last 10 years. A major guideline in this building is that in the current state of the art of solar energy, you don't make the sun work any harder than you have to. So this building is almost a thermos bottle, sealed in this chemical foam, a heat barrier equivalent to 12 inches of fiberglass. Even on a raw spring day like this, temperature in the low 30s, wind chill about 10, the basic solar heating system won't have to operate. The sun that comes through the thermal windows, the body heat of town employees and visitors, the escaping warmth of coffee makers and light bulbs will be locked inside by the insulation principle, holding the temperature at 68 degrees with no help from a heating plant. But if that principle needs help, it gets it from a process that starts here in solar panels filled with a chemical, sulfur dioxide, that brings down heat from the sun, storing it in a sandbox that runs under the entire building. A tiny fan blows the warmth from the wet sand through the structure. Does the system work? It seems to. Last January 11th, with limited sun and the temperature 17 degrees below zero, the cost of operating the one backup electric heater they have was $1.43. The best example we found of solar energy working in the marketplace is this 254-unit community in Ventura, California, one of the largest solar energy projects in the world. It is an elegantly simple system in which hot water from the panels provides the hot water and space heating to the apartments and the heated pool. The tenants' rent bills stay low because the sun cuts energy costs by 25%. A few miles away, the owners are building another development. With gas prices rising, the solar units are twice the size here to save still more on fuel bills. And the plan is to double the size of the units back at Ventura del Sol as well, to save still more money. Jim Piper designed the system at Ventura and scores of others, large and small, saving energy and money for their owners. But he thinks Washington doesn't really care.
I literally wrote hundreds of letters to the federal government saying, look, the technology is here. It doesn't cost a lot of money. Come look at it. To date, there have been 2 people from the United States government who've gone out to see the largest residential solar system in the world, which is Ventura del Sol. We've had 9 foreign governments send contingents officially to look at that project. So while our government doesn't seem to be very interested in it at all, they seem to have the attitude of, why don't you go away? People are coming from other places in the world saying, how do we get this technology?
The government has been deceiving the nation into thinking that solar heating is so expensive you can't afford it.
For Harry Thomason, the frustration has been that the federal government spent almost $200,000 to study his system, which sells for only $5,000, and then bottled up the results.
I says, look, you people know that it's inexpensive. You've got to prove, you've had it for over 2 years now. 1977, you had to prove that this system had already saved roughly 2/3 of heat from the sun. Why don't you release that data? And I kept after them. I've been over 3 years now trying to force them to bring out data of that nature. And finally, yesterday, they told me we're going to bring it out, we're going to bring it out widely to let the people know that now there is a low-cost system. And of course, I say there's been one all along, you just wouldn't recognize it.
For the solar industry, the problem has been how to crack the marketplace. What would it take in terms of government action? Dennis Hayes heads the solar lobby in Washington.
What I would do, for the most part, is try to overcome the 2 principal obstacles that exist to rapid solar dissemination in society. That's the lack of available financing, which I think would be solved by a federal solar bank that would make long-term, low-interest loans available to anyone who wanted to purchase solar equipment. And the second is to move aggressively in the realm of consumer protection. People have to be confident that if they buy this stuff, it's either going to work or else they're going to be able to exchange it for something that does work. And there are any number of ways that one could structure a federal program to give them effectively that guarantee. If we could achieve those 2 things, consumer protection and a heavily endowed solar bank to provide us with the financing that we need, then I think we'd have a solar revolution on our hands very quickly.
The story will continue after this.
Loans and warranties are among the proposals now before the president, part of a solar package that was sent to the White House 6 months ago. It's not clear how far and fast the president will choose to go to shift the economy toward solar energy. So for now, what the federal government does most for the consumer is to give a tax credit for installing solar equipment. That's not been enough to start a solar boom, and the system designers think it would help if the government simply would say that solar units can be good for your pocketbook now. Now, you said it would be nice if the government said this technology works, but wouldn't that be an improper matter of the government endorsing your company?
Well, from my point of view, the government could endorse the technology. I see the President of the United States essentially endorsing nuclear technology. I can't, for the life of me, see anything in the way of the federal government saying, here's a technology that can help us solve the crisis that's occurring in our economy.
The federal solar program has, until recently, been dominated by people who came out of the Atomic Energy Commission, out of NASA, out of the National Science Foundation. They've all been infatuated with big, flashy, high technology. They've all grown up in an era where engineering efficiencies of scale, for example, in nuclear power plants or coal-fired power plants, absolutely dictated that you move to bigger and bigger and bigger projects.
Are there things the government could just stop doing that would help?
Well, one thing that the government could certainly stop doing that would help is when they have their various solar demonstration programs, they could start putting some money into small, decentralized, cost-effective options and stop building all of these gold-plated turkeys. The federal
Give me an
government.
example of a gold-plated turkey.
Well, one example would clearly be the Barstow Power Tower.
The power tower is only a model now, an expensive dream heading toward reality in the California desert, with heavy political backing from electric utilities. Those mirrors will cover 80 acres, focusing on that water tower to boil the water inside, to make steam, to turn a generator, to push electricity down a conventional power line, and eventually through a utility company meter. It is to cost $128 million and has a life of its own, even though Secretary of Energy James Schlesinger has little enthusiasm for it.
I think that quite possibly the government, including the Congress, may be too much enamored of it. The Congress has generally pressed in this direction. I myself am quite skeptical about whether or not we are going to have major electric power production systems of that sort. We are building them on an experimental basis, but they're very costly. And the production of electric power is the most difficult area, it seems to me, in which solar energy may compete.
Would you describe yourself, or would you ally yourself with the people who say, let's use the simple kind of stuff that we already know about it as opposed to this new high technology?
I think that generally that is quite right. It is these smaller projects that have the probability of near-term payoff, whereas the grandiose projects probably will remain grandiose.
It's not just the grandiose projects that gall solar advocates, but projects like this one south of Los Angeles, where the Southern California Gas Company is using its own and federal money on these garden apartment roofs. It's expensive. $600,000 in gas company funds, $400,000 in federal funds. It's testing a technology for heating water, no space heating. $1 million to study a technique that critics say has been in practical use for decades. And then there's this other project. This is one of 3 houses, energy-saving houses. The gas company working with the federal government and with the cooperation of the builder here at Mission Viejo. These houses have energy-saving appliances inside, and they're built just right, with super insulation and with solar collecting panels on the roof. But critics charge that $700,000 is being spent to study what almost every building contractor already knows. Jim Piper thinks all the money spent on those houses just gives solar a bad name.
I can remember talking to an architect after the original amount of that information got released to the press. The architect said, $620,000 to do 2 solar houses. Boy, I don't want solar in anything I do. Get out of here.
Why are the gas company and the federal government spending all this money? Pat Shea is vice president of Southern California Gas.
We think that the demonstration of the technology and the fact that you can put together a system that works is very important. Now, there have been component parts available for a long, long time. The problem in solar, as in many other energy technologies, has been the development of a system that works. And therefore, we think that our research project has made a real contribution in that regard.
Critics say the gas company is just getting public relations value out of solar with government help. What the gas company mostly wants to do is sell gas. When a consumer asks how long it takes for a solar water heater to pay for itself, the gas company fact sheet says very long to almost never.
I think that the times are with us. In my view, nuclear power is essentially dead and coal is rapidly dying, and oil began to decline in 1970 in this country and just isn't a future energy source that we can turn to. Within that context, all we have left are solar and the other renewables, and sooner or later we're going to get a national leader who has the vision to understand that and will begin to lead us into the solar era. And until that leader comes along, or until Jimmy Carter decides to transform himself into it, then in a lot of piecemeal ways, item after item, we're going to pass pieces of legislation through Congress and we'll make a little bit more progress, but not in the comprehensive fashion that I'd like.
We put it to Secretary Schlesinger, are he and the president roadblocks to a beautiful solar future?
No, I think that is really quite preposterous. The president is a solar energy buff and has been campaigned in that way. We in the department are eager to bring on solar energy, bring it on as rapidly as possible, once again, being assured that it is affordable by the average family. If it is not, if it drives up the family budget, then it will not be satisfactory to the country at large. So we must introduce it in a way that brings about changes in fashion. And both the president and I heartily endorse moving in that way.
Our purpose here has not been to sell you a product or to tout you on a system. But solar energy is not an experiment. It works, and it works in the marketplace. The problem is to swing society around, to make use of the sun, to understand its simplicity, its potential for providing a part of our energy at a favorable cost. The solar system is doing quite well, thank you. It's the political system and the economic system that may need a little help.